Welcome everyone, StealthyShiroean here, and today I'm bringing you my review of the Humble Choice bundle for February 2023. Another month of games, and wow, what a month! This was a definite must-buy month for me, but let me tell you my thoughts on the games. Let me know what you think of this month's bundle as well in the comments below. Be sure to check the timestamps for specific games, and stay tuned for my final thoughts in the end. Okay, let's get to the review. First up is a full-motion video game called 5 Dates. It's a rom-com set during COVID lockdowns. You play as Vinny, who is basically a blank slate. Players set up a dating app profile for him at the start, covering some of his interests, his job, and his astrological sign, of which I had no idea what those meant. Then you select 3 starter dates and the game begins. Choices the player makes influences how the dates go and how each potential romantic interest takes to you for future dates. As you go through the game, the player eliminates a choice until only one woman remains. It has a very simple choose-your-own-adventure style and is honestly more like watching a movie than playing a game. After playing, I noticed some reviewers on Steam saying that Vinny is just saying whatever he needs in order to get the girl's attention, but I don't think that was the creator's intent. Instead, it felt like Vinny was purposely left as a blank slate so that the choices would define him in that particular playthrough. I went over my hour a bit with this and completed one of the game's endings. What is here I found to be surprisingly entertaining. The acting was done incredibly well with definite talent backing the game. I really liked the conversations, and I'd say if you're susceptible to secondhand embarrassment, then be warned, there's a lot of that here. Also, Vinny has the most supportive friend ever. I really like their banter with one another. Anyway, I'd give this one a try if a rom-com sounds interesting to you, but if not, I can't imagine this piquing your interest since it doesn't offer much else. Fobia St. Dinfna Hotel is a horror game that takes you to a creepy hotel and investigates some sort of cult. So naturally, I was reminded of last October's Made of Scare. This game is quite a bit different in its story as well as the gameplay. Here we have a blend of exploration and puzzle solving as well as combat, although I can't comment on the combat at all since I wasn't able to get that far. To be honest, I got stuck very early on in the beginning because I couldn't figure out how to get out of my hotel room. That being said, I think most of the puzzles were fairly intuitive. In fact, the only reason why I couldn't figure out how to get the lock combination was because I just wasn't paying enough attention to an item I picked up. The story, without giving too much away, not that I really could anyway, deals with some sort of timey-wimey stuff. Even just in the beginning, you play as 2 different characters spaced around 50 years apart. More interesting is the camera that the player receives. At first I thought it was just going to be a night vision mode similar to Outlast, but the game surprised me by letting you peer into different times with it, which not only sounds cool, but it lets you pilfer items and find alternative paths you can't see with the naked eye. And to double down on the Doctor Who references, there's even a creepy kid wearing a gas mask that I kept on expecting to ask me if I was her mummy. Anyway, I liked this one, and I thought the story at first impressions was interesting. Probably won't play this anytime soon, but I definitely can see bringing it out around Halloween or something. Next we have the roguelite of the month being Scourgebringer, and despite my burnout with this genre, I found myself really enjoying this one. This game is pretty difficult, and the game reminds you of this when you click on a new game. Although, I do suck quite a bit too. However, as a really nice surprise, the game also tells you that it has an adaptive difficulty system that monitors how you play and changes it itself accordingly. I really like that because I did feel after it realized that I was really bad, it started turning things down. This helped me to understand the mechanics and have better timing with deflecting attacks and jumping from enemy to enemy. The gameplay here is so satisfying. It's really fast-paced, and since I died so much, many of my runs only lasted a few minutes. Even the longer runs topped out around 5 to 6 minutes. I think this was really encouraging to keep on doing one more run since I could jump right back in. At the same time, I would feel pretty frustrated if I died stupidly too many times in a row. The game does something for that as well, though. At the start of some runs, you meet Peppy, who gives you several bonuses to help you out in the beginning. This reminded me a lot of the current Super Mario Bros. Games that give you an easy mode if you're having difficulty. I wouldn't go that far as to say it was easy, but of course it did help with those runs over the ones where you don't have the buffs. I'm not sure that I'll be returning to this one anytime soon, but it does stand out as one of the better roguelites in recent memory. I definitely recommend giving it a go. Shady Part of Me tells the tale of a girl's dreamlike journey with her shadow. It combines 2D and 3D gameplay between the girl and her shadow to create some clever puzzle solving to move through the levels. I thought that the ambience and the art style was really helpful in conveying the right kind of feel for a dream. Much of the scenery felt whimsical and in line with the character, at least within the first hour of play. The story itself is a bit too abstract for me, and I couldn't really tell you what was going on, but I suppose that makes sense with the theme of the game. In addition to the 2D and 3D gameplay, there is a clever use of the dichotomy between light and darkness. The 2D gameplay is a platformer, and the shadow can only jump onto shadow platforms, with many of them being made by the girl in 3D gameplay. None of these puzzles felt too complicated though, which for me is a huge plus because I'm not really into brain-bending puzzle games. It's been especially interesting playing this game since my current small game dev project revolves around a little girl and a nightmare. You can see my progress with that in the card above if you're interested. I plan on coming back to this one, and with its 5 to 6 hour runtime, I think I definitely will be finishing this in the near future. Next up is a turn-based tactics strategy game mixed with roguelite known as Othercide. I heard about this game before but didn't know much, so I was certainly surprised to find that it was a roguelite. Since I only finished one run, and by finish I mean that I died horribly, I can't really comment on the roguelite aspects of the game, but the core gameplay loop seems to be good. Othercide is all about making tough choices. The story, from what I could gather, is about this entity, known as Mother, fighting the forces of evil led by the Child. And to fight this, she uses proxies called Daughters. These Daughters have different classes and abilities to control the battlefield. Every time one of the Daughters gets hurt in a fight, then it's persistent. The only way to heal one is to sacrifice another, which is a brutal concept, but one the player will have to weigh for the risk of having less fighters, but also having the best ones in top shape. There's an easier difficulty, but I opted for the harder one this time because that was the game's original intent. In the easier difficulty, Daughters can gain back some health every new day, which lowers the impact of needing to sacrifice. The fights themselves play out on a traditional grid, but it emphasizes the timeline, which monitors every character's initiative. Different moves can push an enemy further back in initiative. Also, if a player chooses, they can burst their fighter to do more actions in a given turn, but that sets them all the way at the end of the initiative track. There's a ton of risk versus reward here, and the players need to think about their actions to survive from encounter to encounter. The turn track reminded me a lot of Grandia's combat system to those familiar with that older JRPG. I was really impressed with what I played here. Originally, when I first came across the game, I wasn't in love with the aesthetic, so I wrote it off. But after playing it, I think they match up perfectly to the game's overall tone. Looking past that, this is definitely a title I would like to come back to soon. I saw Thronebreaker a while back and didn't really think that much of it. I knew that it had done well in reviews, but always assumed I wouldn't be into it since it was a spin-off title based on Gwent. Now, I don't mean to say that I don't like Gwent or that it's bad or whatever, but I just didn't have any love for the game. I only played a few matches of Gwent in their CCG, and I never played The Witcher 3. Not to mention, I had assumed, wrongly, that Thronebreaker was just Gwent but with a story slapped on. I'm happy to say that's not the case. The story here, from what I could tell, seems to be well thought out and brings rich characters along with branching choices in the narrative. There's also other RPG mechanics, such as a base to upgrade for various benefits, needing to manage resources to get past obstacles, as well as purchasing new cards or upgrades. And there's a lot of exploration on the overworld map that I was really surprised to see. In addition, I like the stylistic art approach they took with Thronebreaker, which has a comic-like feel to it, rather than a more realistic tone we see in the mainline Witcher games. This one is a strong contender for this bundle, and one I'd like to finish. Also, I want to mention that redeeming this game gave me a copy of The Witcher 1 Enhanced Edition. I didn't play it because it didn't seem part of the bundle, but really part of the game if you were to purchase it normally. That said, I can't honestly recommend playing the first Witcher. Out of the three, that was the only one I played completely through. The story does pick up in the last third of the game, but the gameplay is just god-awful in my opinion. I think the only reason why I got through it is because I purposely played that one first before moving on to the second one. Otherwise, I don't think I could have done it. So there's my 2 cents. Try it if you really want to see the origins of the video game franchise, otherwise just play one of the later ones. Or wait for the announced remake to come out. Following that is another major franchise being Bethesda's post-apocalyptic open-world RPG Fallout 76. I owned this beforehand and was one of the ones playing this when it first came out. And yeah, it was rough. While I never seriously dived in over the years, I have dabbled with it whenever big changes were made, and I think they really have improved the game. Since it's been a while since I last played, I decided to start a new character for the sake of seeing the starter experience for all the potential new players coming to the game. And for those who know anything about Fallout, it's about what you would expect. You wake up in a vault, and after getting your bearings, are released into the world. In Fallout 76's story, it's only 25 years after the falling of the bombs, but things have still drastically changed in West Virginia. As is usually the case with a Bethesda open-world RPG, you can go off on your own and head to any direction you please, and take on any quest that strikes your fancy. With the inclusion of living NPCs, and not just the voice recordings that we had in the past, this game feels much more like a Fallout game. Much of the game, maybe even all of it, can be played single player if you desire, and I think it's easy to do even if you didn't pay for your own server. Public servers only have up to 24 players, and I've hardly ran into any in my time playing since the world is so big. I think the only other noticeable change from one of Bethesda's other Fallout titles, besides the multiplayer, is the change to VATS, or the targeting system in the game. Now instead of pausing the game like in 3, or slowing down time like in 4, it's basically just a targeting system to quickly attack certain parts of an enemy. I assume this is because of the multiplayer nature of the game. I tend to use VATS now only to kill fast small things since they're hard to aim at. There's also a base building system in the game that is very similar to Fallout 4. I can't make much with it, but I'm sure it's great for all those creative people out there. Anyway, this is definitely a must-play for me, and yet another one that I want to play more of, but I have been saying that for years now. Also, this came with the first Fallout, but honestly, Bethesda tries to give away the originals at every turn that it's highly probable you already have this one. I played only about 15 minutes of the game in the past, and then promptly uninstalled it because it's really hard to play an older game if you don't already have some sort of nostalgia for it. Even still, this seemed like a good time to jump back in and tell you what I think, since, unlike The Witcher 1, this was explicitly included in the bundle. And, well, I would have done that, but I couldn't get the capture to work properly with the game, and still allow me to figure things out. This version definitely doesn't support higher resolutions, or it does, but everything is so tiny. There might be some sort of mod out there to play the original with though, so I'd look around if you're interested in this. From what little I did play, it's about the same as I remember. You get thrown into the game with no tutorial and have to figure things out. My guess is that it will be a lot of trial and error if you want to play this, and didn't play it before in the 90s. Last but not least is Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. This is a sprawling CRPG that takes place in the Pathfinder setting using the corresponding rule set. The story revolves around some sort of holy crusade against demons that invaded the world. And that's about all I got from it. As is always the case with these kinds of games, it exposes one of the biggest flaws in my system for only doing an hour. It's really hard to get any kind of idea from the game as to whether or not it's worth it based on that time, although I still like to think you can glean enough from it to decide if it's something to at least try. For me, this is of course a game I would like to play. It has rich lore and world building, along with a robust RPG system with a ton of choices in classes and progression. There seems like there will be plenty of companions to interact with, as well as plenty of chances to roleplay your character through a vast array of dialogue options. It's a game that is right up my alley, but it's always a matter of having enough time. I still have barely touched Kingmaker, which was their last game, that I'm fairly certain I received in a Humble Monthly a couple years back. Basically, if you like games like this, you can bet that this one will be worth your time. Oh, and I always forget to mention these things, but there is a 75% off coupon included in the bundle for the game's first season pass. Okay, let's wrap this up and see if this bundle is worth it or not. I based my rating solely on whether I thought the game was worth playing on about an hour or so of hands-on gameplay. Also, I'd be grateful if you could please give the video a like if you're enjoying it, because that really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm gods. Overall, this is a great month for Humble Choice. Honestly, with these 3 incredibly strong headliners and a very solid supporting cast of games, I don't know that Humble will be able to top this month for the rest of the year. I mean, as usual, these games aren't for everyone, and the sheer differences in genres are enough not to appeal to everyone's taste. I definitely feel that each game had its own merits though. Also, since I didn't redeem Fallout 76, Fallout 1, or the Witcher 1 Enhanced Edition, I'd like to give those away. If you'd like to claim one of them, then please just leave a comment about your thoughts on the bundle and which game you'd like to receive. If there's multiple ones for the same game, then I'll just randomly choose them from the comments. Really, the only one bad thing about this month is that I know Humble probably won't be able to match it in March. But I'm not really complaining that much, and who knows, I could be wrong, and hopefully I am. But enough about next month, and let's go over the recommendations for this month. For my must-plays of the month, these are quite easily the 3 headliners being Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, Thronebreaker The Witcher Tales, and Fallout 76. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is a big CRPG with an interesting narrative, companions, and character progression. To anyone into these kinds of games like me, it's an instant must-play even with my limited exposure to it. Thronebreakers was a lot more than just Gwent with a side-along story. Instead, there's a compelling narrative here as well, and what is shaping up to be its own strong RPG in its own right. Fallout 76, while it didn't have the greatest fanfare on release, has done loads to improve the game and add new content that I think can stand on its own as a great Fallout game to play through. And now you could do it with friends too, which is a huge plus depending on if that's something you're looking for. The strong recommendations are Othercide, Fobia St. Dinfna Hotel, Shady Part of Me, and Scourgebringers. Othercide does something different than usual from other roguelites by providing fun tactics gameplay and tough decisions. Fobia is a horror game that has a really interesting story, but I'm kind of a sucker for anything dealing with multiple timelines. Shady Part of Me was a very chill platforming puzzle-solving game that had a nice ambiance even if the story was hard to parse out. Finally, Scourgebringers brought some really fun, fast-paced combat to the roguelite genre, and I actually like that even despite its difficulty. In my week recommendations, I'd put 5 Dates here. It was an amusing game, but it really didn't feel like playing a game at all. Instead, it was a decent enough interactive movie. Finally, I guess I'll place the free add-ons to the bundle somewhere here as well since we received them. Fallout would probably be placed as a week recommendation. I really want to try the game seriously one of these days, but it's so hard for me to get into. I imagine its age will make it not as accessible to many gamers. The Witcher 1 Enhanced Edition, well, I'd actually place this in Don't Bother With. This was made when CD Projekt Red was still figuring out how to best perfect their gameplay formula with a much smaller budget, and it shows. And that wraps up my thoughts on this month's bundle, a really great month especially for RPG fans. Do you agree with my thoughts? What games, if any, are you looking forward to playing? Let me know what your thoughts are, or if there are some different recommendations you'd make in the comments below. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.